My name is Asia Sampson, and today on Baptism Overland, I might be destroying this Rome box, and some of you might not like it. Let me tell you about two issues that I have. Number one, as someone who uses his rig as a daily driver, I have a ton of gear in the Jeep that I don't always need on a day-to-day basis. You know, sometimes I'll drive around and I'll see some overland rigs, and not to knock what they're doing, it's your vehicle, do what you want, but I'll see gear on there that I know they're not using right now. Like, I have seen your vehicle in my neighborhood many times, so I know you're not overlanding, and we are currently in the middle of the Walmart parking lot, so do you really need your Max Tracks and your jerry cans mounted to your vehicle at this moment? Do what you want to do, but for me, I don't want to do that. I don't want gear that's on my vehicle that can easily be taken or stolen, or things that I just don't need. It's just a waste of space. Number two, this family has two very capable off-road vehicles now. I have my Jeep and my wife has her 4Runner. And what I don't want to do is buy double the gear so that each rig has its own set. But what I also don't want to do is, if we decide to take the 4Runner out off-roading, I don't want to have to go through the Jeep, dig through everything to figure out what we're going to need, and then transfer it over to the 4Runner and vice versa. It's just going to be a pain in the butt. So how do I plan to rectify that situation? Well, this is the Rome box I've owned for a very long time. It used to sit in the roof rack of my Jeep before I got the rooftop tent. Since then, it's sort of just been sitting in my garage collecting dust because I haven't figured out what exactly I want to do with it. Well, today we're going to modify this Rome box and turn it into the most comprehensive off-road kit I can build. That means that in here I'll be able to store my recovery gear, my toe straps, my snatch blocks, my D-rings. I'll be able to store my air deflate and inflation tools. I'll be able to store limb risers. No camping stuff, just off-road specific items. And here is the part where you might get mad at me. We're also going to mount the Max Tracks on here, which means that I'm going to have to cut into this box somehow to be able to store the Max Tracks right on top. I mean, look at this. These Max Tracks are pretty much the same length as my Rome box. What makes this system great is that when we go off-roading, then all I gotta do is take this entire system and strap it down to the top of my closed rooftop tent. And then if we decide to go with the 4Runner, then I can just easily unstrap it from the Jeep and strap it down to the roof rack of the 4Runner, and we're good to go. Everything that I need for off-roading will already be in here. What makes this even better is on those days when we're just daily driving around town and we're not going off-roading, then this entire kit can just stay inside the garage, which means no one can steal it off our vehicles, which means a lighter load. I mean, it's just the perfect solution to have everything that we need in one place, and I can transfer it from vehicle to vehicle. So let me show you the ideas I have, because it's more than just mounting this Max Tracks on here. We have some other things that we're going to do to modify the inside as well. Now, this is what I was trying to show earlier. Take a look at the size of this Max Tracks and how it just sits so perfectly on top of this Rome box. What's even crazier is the mounting holes that you put your pins through to mount your Max Tracks. Well, those holes right here line up perfectly with one of the ridges on the Rome box. And guess what? On the other side, it lines up with this ridge too. And as far as width, well, here are your two mounting holes, and it still falls inside this little ridge. Now, the only problem with mounting those pins directly onto the lid of this Rome box is, if you look at the ridges sort of angle upwards on each side, which means if I were to put a mounting pin on each end of this, well, those mounting pins won't be sticking straight up. They'll sort of angle outwards, which will make it really tough for me to grab the Max Tracks and slide it straight down onto those pins. But I think I have a solution. The plan is to build a frame. I'm going to take a piece of aluminum bar and size it to go from one mounting hole to the other on one side, and then I'll do the same on the other side. I'll have a piece of aluminum going from this mounting hole to that mounting hole, and then I will put the mounting pins onto that. And then somewhere in the middle of that aluminum bar, that's what I'm going to attach to the Rome box itself. So let's get that built out. You gonna watch me build? Yeah? I'm gonna build some stuff today. there it is, the Maxtrax mounted on top of the Roam box, and I think it looks great. I still can't believe this actually worked. But I did make a mistake, and it was one of those things that I overlooked and didn't think about thoroughly, and it had to do with the distance between this pin and this pin. When I originally laid the Maxtrax on top of the Roam box, I looked at the mounting holes where you would put these pins through, and it looked like it was falling dead center of the ridges on the cargo box, which for the most part it did, and I was able to make the brackets and line them up directly to those ridges, not realizing that the distance between this mounting hole and this mounting hole is kind of just a little bit off from the distance between the center of this ridge and the center of that ridge. So the pins weren't lining up perfectly. Thankfully, I was able to fix it, and it was actually an easy fix. All I had to do was make another bracket. Then I took that bracket and then mounted it on the Roam box like I did before. I just didn't punch out the holes yet for these mounting pins. Then I laid the Maxtrax back on top, made sure that these holes were aligned, and then went over here and then kind of just took a marker and marked out where the mounting holes should go for these pins. After that, perfectly. So let me just take you into the guts of this thing so I can show you exactly how those brackets look like underneath this Maxtrax. This is pretty much the setup. It's actually really simple. It's a bracket that I made out of an aluminum bar, and then on the ends I kind of curved them in a little bit so that none of it is poking out from underneath the Maxtrax. I just put the Maxtrax down, traced out where the edges were, then rounded out the corners. I think it just makes it look so much cleaner and nicer so that when the Maxtrax goes down, you don't see any of this at all. As far as mounting it to the Roam box, it's actually really simple. It falls right in the middle of these ridges that are on the Roam box, so I just mounted it directly to the middle of that. But I did use some plastic spacers in order for me to lift this bracket up a little bit, just so that I can clear the nuts that are at the bottom of these mounting pins. Speaking of the mounting pins, when you buy them, the bolts at the bottom of them are pretty long. And that's because Maxtrax doesn't know where you're going to be mounting it, and they want to be able to give you the flexibility to mount it wherever you want. So all I had to do was cut off some of that bolt in order for that to clear this area. Then I took some silicone and basically siliconed the areas where I punched into the Roam box so that water won't go in. So basically I have silicone underneath these washers. I got some silicone underneath those washers and also in between the spacers, just to kind of make sure this is watertight and that water isn't going inside the Roam box. Speaking of the inside, what makes these cargo boxes super lightweight despite how big they are is because they're just molded plastic that's been assembled together. So which means that between all these surfaces, like this surface here and the main box itself, there's just a lot of air inside there. But that also means that in order for me to mount this bracket and have it go all the way through, I needed to get a bolt that was long enough to go from the bracket that I made on the other side through a spacer, then through all that empty space between these surfaces and have it come out on the other side, and then I can bolt it down. Now I could have just punched a hole inside these cavities here because the gap between this surface and the other surface is much thinner. However, inside these cavities, they're curved, which means that once I put a washer through and then I put a nut through, then it's not going to sit flat. So I had to go into the flat areas that I could find. Only problem is it's going to go right inside these little channels here. So what I did was I just took another plastic spacer, put that in there, and that created a flat surface so that when I put the washer and the nut, it sits really flat. And so that was, for me, the best place to put this. Now look how easy it is to put these Maxtrax back on. And that's it. Pretty great, right? All right, let's get to the other mods. All right, up next, we're going to work on organizing the inside. Now, I don't consider this to be DIY like I do with the Maxtrax brackets we just made. I consider this to be more of a modification. When you buy a Roam cargo box, they offer some accessories for them, and one of those accessories are lid organizers. Lid organizers are these items that you attach to the lid of your cargo box that just allows you to organize your gear a little bit better. And they have two kinds, one with pockets, and then the one that I got, which is a Molle Panel. I think a Molle Panel would just work out better for me because I have a ton of gear that I want to organize that I just know won't fit in some of the pockets that they have on the other one. At least with this, I can get some quick fists, I can get some straps, and I can just attach whatever it is that I want to attach to this thing. I will say that I'm a little bit disappointed because when I went and purchased this, I bought it during Black Friday and I got it for about $100, and I expected it to be made of aluminum. And this is plastic. Now, I'm sure it's okay, and I think plastic makes it lighter, right? But I don't know, it just feels flimsy to me, but I think once we start attaching all the bolts through here, then I think it'll be okay, and it should hold the things that I want it to hold. It's just that when I close the lid, it's going to be like this, and some of the gear that I have that might be too heavy, I don't know if it'll start to bend this after a while. So that's a little bit concerning. We'll see how it works out. But before I go and attach this to the box, let's go ahead and lay this out. Let me get all the stuff that I want to put on it, then that way we can kind of organize what goes where. Believe me when I say I wanted to add a ton more stuff and really pack this thing out, but finding out that it's plastic now, that just makes me a little bit leery of doing that. I don't want to load this thing up with a whole bunch of gear, and then when that lid closes, gravity is just going to make that weight buckle this thing. So we're going to keep it light. The heaviest thing that's going to be on this thing is my hatchet. I wanted to put an axe, but that's not going to happen. So instead, we're going to go with the hatchet. I'm going to put that on one of these quick fists, and that'll just grip on both sides. I'm going to have to punch some holes for this quick fist to attach to, because we can't put it through these big holes. And I would have thought that they would have put maybe some holes here and there sporadically to attach stuff like this, but there isn't any. So we're gonna have to do that ourselves. I've got my MaxTrax straps. I'm just gonna put that on there with a Velcro strap. And then I also have my ARB Easy Deflator Kit. And then my last quick fist I'm gonna use for this. It's gonna wrap around up here to grip my, my inflator. And then I'll use a Velcro strap at the bottom to kind of hold the hose in place. You hear that? That is the sound of people grumbling under their breath. They're thinking of something to say. They're putting their fingers on the keyboard, ready to go off in the comments. Why would you drill holes in a $400 cargo box? Is it you? Yeah? If it is, go ahead. Write it in the comments. I want to know what you think and why I shouldn't have done this. It's not for everybody. I can admit that. A lot of you want to have your cargo boxes permanently mounted to the roof rack of your vehicle. I did at one point. And you may already also have mounts for your MaxTrax somewhere, either on the roof rack, on the side of it, or even by the tailgate. But for me, it works. I just didn't want to carry all this off-roading equipment with me on a day-to-day basis, especially when I don't need it. The last thing I want is for someone to drive by and say, oh, he got some MaxTrax. Those look nice. I want to take them. Even if you put a lock on it, if someone wants something badly enough, they're going to take it. So I just wanted to make sure that I kept it at home and I didn't bring it out unless I'm going off-roading. Plus, I really didn't want it to be shouting, hey, look at how cool I am with my MaxTrax. The second thing is I don't have a garage that I pull my vehicle into. It always stays in the driveway, and what I didn't want is for my cargo box and my MaxTrax to be mounted permanently on my roof rack under the hot Florida sun for 365 days a year, and in a couple of years from now, this stuff is going to start to fade. I've owned this Rome cargo box for a long time. It was one of the first things that I bought for the Jeep, and it used to be permanently mounted to my old roof rack for a while, and it already started to fade. So I kind of want to prevent it from fading even more, and especially the Max Tracks, I don't want that fading, and I haven't even had a chance to use it yet. Now, are there some downsides? Of course. For starters, when I loaded up the box with all my gear, it got really heavy. I mean, you're talking about snatch blocks and toe straps and air compressors and hatchets. And then I put the Max Tracks on there, it got even heavier. So lifting this onto the roof rack before I go off-roading and then taking it off when I'm done is going to be a big pain in the butt. What I found myself doing was emptying the box, loading it onto the roof rack, and then putting all my stuff back in, which you might think is counterintuitive. But what I've wanted to do with this, and the reason why I decided to do this, is so that I can move the gear between two vehicles. I can put it on the Jeep one day and I can put it on the 4Runner the next. And before, if I had to move all that gear from one to the other, I'd have to dig through all the compartments in my Jeep to find everything that I needed, then put that in the 4Runner somewhere, and then bring it all back and reorganize it again back in the Jeep. At least here, even if I have to take everything out, then at least I know I'm not missing something. Everything that I need for off-roading is going to be in this kit, in this box. So all I have to do is just empty it out, put it up, and then put everything back in without having to dig through all my vehicles to find something else that I might be missing. But I do have a gripe. Like I said, I bought this Rome box a long time ago, did an install video on it, got a bunch of views. So I think it's the perfect time for me to kind of update you on how I've liked it so far. And I do, except for the one gripe that I have that I know a lot of you had because you put it in the comments of my other video, and that is how to lock this thing up. See, the way this thing locks is the two areas, the lid and the main body. When they come together, there's a hole and you could put a padlock through it. Problem is that area is too thick for a small padlock to fit. So you can get a bigger padlock, but then the holes for that padlock to go through is too small. It's almost like they put two conflicting things together. This area that's too thick for a small lock to go through, but then it has too small of a hole for the bigger locks to go through. So it's kind of like choose one lane or the other. Either make it thin enough so that we can put the smaller locks, or keep it that thick but just have the holes a little bit bigger so that a regular padlock can fit in that. Because the only thing I've been able to find to lock this thing with is a cable lock, and I really don't want those because someone can just come with some snippers and... Now, the other gripe that I have is getting this Molle panel and finding out that it's not made of aluminum, but it's made of plastic. And now I'm thinking about the fact that I spent $100 for this thing during Black Friday. I think regularly it's like 129 bucks for some plastic. And there's no reinforcements in the middle. It's all attached at the very edges. So that means that whatever I put on this thing, if it's too heavy, once I close that lid down, I have a feeling that all that heavy stuff is going to start to bend that plastic a little bit. That just feels really cheap, especially for $100. But I see why it's plastic though, because you would think that attaching this Molle panel to the lid of your cargo box would be super easy. There's already pre-made holes in there with some threads, and you just basically bolt it in. However, you have to put a spacer between this Molle panel and the lid itself so that you have some separation from the lid so you can basically route some stuff through it. Well, trying to get those spacers between the lid and your Molle panel, especially when it's perfectly cut to the lid, was near impossible. I mean, you only had these little holes in the Molle panel to kind of slip something through. I'm glad it was plastic because you can kind of bend it a little bit and then kind of reach in there. I'm just hoping that you have some really thin fingers like I do, and even then I was having a really hard time. So Rome, if you're listening, number one, fix your locking situation. Give us an opportunity to use whatever padlock we want so we can really secure this thing the way we want to. Number two, if you're going to remake these Molle panels again, just build in the spacers in the back of it. I mean, I think you can mold plastic that way, right? With some spacers already built in, so we don't have to kind of put the spacer back there and then try to thread everything through. We can just put it up and bolt it in. And number three, if you like this little Max Tracks DIY thing that I made, hit me up and maybe we can collaborate on something that you can do to the Rome box where we can add some Max Tracks mounts on there without having to do any kind of DIY. I think that would be awesome. I'm thinking some riv nuts at the top and then make some separate brackets that we can just bolt down. I mean, that would be pretty awesome. It's already going to be sized up for a Max Tracks. Hit me up, man. I think that would be amazing. But that's it. I hope this thing gave you a ton of ideas for your own kind of setup. I'm actually really proud of this because it's something that's out of the box. See what I did? But also something that I haven't seen anyone do, so I can't wait to try it out. We're actually hitting the trails this weekend, so I'll get to see whether or not this kind of setup works for me. But if you did enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and also consider following us on Patreon so we can continue to make more content like this. And as always, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Baptism Overland. My name is Asia Sampson, and I will see you next time.